Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019, and today we're going to be talking about the best case scenario for Senator Bernie Sanders in the year 2020. Now, looking at the currently announced candidates, Bernie Sanders seems like he is the front runner, and he is going to go on to win the nomination again of currently announced candidates. But looking at the overall data, we have a lot more information about certain races in 2020. Not just so much the presidential race, but we have a number of contested Senate races and House races coming up. But overall, this election is going to be very interesting. So I wanted to see what is the best case for Bernie Sanders. I've done a best case scenario for Donald Trump, for Democrats as a whole. But Bernie Sanders is not just any Democrat. Some Democrats are going to be able to win in states that Bernie Sanders may not be able to win in, such as states like Texas or Georgia, as of right now. Now, looking at Bernie Sanders as a candidate, he seems like a pretty strong candidate. He consistently leads Donald Trump in almost every single state. And although he does trail Joe Biden nationwide, it does seem like Bernie Sanders could be on the pathway to the nomination. After his recent announcement, pretty recent, to be honest with you, it just doesn't seem that way. But after his recent announcement, his numbers have gone up, and I mean by 9 to 10% in national polls compared to before. They were before he announced, seems like it is a real possibility that he goes on to win this nomination. And again, we all know how Joe Biden is. It doesn't seem too likely that those numbers are going to hold consistently throughout the entire thing. But it also does not mean that Joe Biden is completely out of the race whatsoever. So we'll start off with all the safe Republican states. We know how some of these states are already going to go, and they're probably not going to be changing anytime soon. Again, a lot of you have commented, why does the map look the same almost every single election video? Number one, again, don't blame me, blame the American electorate. I'm not making up these voting trends. I'm not saying North Dakota is going red because I want it to. I'm saying that because that's how it is. And I'm not saying New York is going blue because I want it to. I'm just saying it how it is. And I get it. It does seem a little repetitive. But again, I don't really have that many states I can really flip. Yes, there are a lot of swing states, but it's going to look a little weird if Pennsylvania is red and Texas is blue. And that's not really logical, especially with a number of these candidates. That would be a completely impossibility for this general election. But again, this is the best case scenario for Bernie Sanders, which means that we already have some safe states, but we're just going to characterize all the regular safe Democratic states like Illinois, California, and then you go up to the East Coast, and then you're just, in safe Democratic territory. I did not mean to characterize the state of New Hampshire just yet, but it will soon. Maine's first district, of course, that would be considered safe. I don't know how I missed New York. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, some Republican states that we're missing out on, Montana, Utah. But again, we're going to be characterizing them based off the best case scenario for Bernie Sanders. Now, looking at this map, there are a couple of states that are considered red states, solid red states right now that definitely could narrow down. Sorry about that. My screen recorder cut out. So we were talking about Republican states and solid Republican states that some of them may not be too solid when it comes down to it. And those states can include states like Kansas, states like Indiana, Missouri that definitely look and need further review for this type of election. And again, this is the best case scenario for Bernie Sanders. I'm not in any way saying that these states are going to flip, just that they may be closer than a safe margin for Donald Trump in 2020. So we're actually going to remove the characterization from safe as of right now. We're just going to go ahead and, remove it. West Virginia, we're going to talk about. But for right now, these are all the non-safe states. Now, West Virginia, many people think that Bernie Sanders could do well there because he did well in the Democratic primary. I don't see it. West Virginia is still a Republican state at heart. And if you're looking at the exit poll data actually from 2016, the majority of Bernie Sanders voters wanted a more conservative president. Now, that doesn't really match up considering they voted for Bernie Sanders compared to Hillary Clinton. But it could just be that they may wanted to spite Hillary Clinton for what she has said in the past, what she has said during that election season. Whatever it may be, those voters wanted a more conservative president, and Bernie Sanders right now is definitely not on the more conservative side of the Democratic Party. It doesn't look like that's actually going to be a real possibility for Bernie Sanders to come close in the state of West Virginia. However, in states like Kansas and Montana, Missouri, and Indiana, although they may not be flippable states, they definitely could become likely states into, let me turn the volume off, into the Republican Party, and so going to them. Nonetheless, Utah is another state that we could include as a likely state. Again, still likely, meaning that it's still a real possibility that Donald Trump wins here between 5 to 15%. I'm looking at the lower end of that, so probably 10 to 5%, 5 to 10% at most for the president there. Now for Democratic states, we already have some Democratic states. Virginia would obviously be a safe state. New Mexico's probably going to be a safe state regardless. I forgot to characterize some likely states: Mississippi and South Carolina. Those are other likely states that are going to be likely in favor of the president. But again, looking at this map, Colorado would probably peak out at likely, just looking at the number of candidates now, it's probably going to 13-14%. The state of Nevada would definitely be a likely state. Now, the interesting thing about these three states, New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada, these are all states that are typically Democratic states. If you look back in the year 2000, Nevada and Colorado both flipped towards the GOP. 2004, New Mexico joined them, and then 2008 they were gained back, and they have been won ever since. And if we're looking at the midterm elections from 2018, okay, Nevada had a flip in the Senate. Colorado did not have a Senate race, but they had a governor's race, which held in the Democratic column. The governor's race in New Mexico was a flip for the Democrats and a hold in the United States Senate. Nevada had a flip in the governor's race, and also the Senate race, as I previously mentioned. But that is pretty interesting. Looking at these three states, it does seem like the Sun Belt actually may be turning a little bit more in favor of the Democratic Party, especially since the Rust Belt is turning away from it. It looks like there may be new possibilities for Democrats here, because if you're looking at the Rust Belt there, that's a total of 46 electoral votes are losing. The Democratic Party is definitely not making up those numbers with 20 electoral votes from Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. However, joined by Arizona and Texas, which we're getting into now, it does look like it is possible for the Democrats to win there. But Texas is probably going to be a lean state for Donald Trump, even in the best case scenario for Bernie Sanders. But Arizona, I see going to Bernie Sanders narrowly in his best case. Now that's adding up. That gives the Democratic Party 31 electoral votes, even though it's less than 46. Texas is still in the running for other candidates, which means that it's not completely thrown out for the Democratic Party to make up their numbers there rather than in the Rust Belt. But again, this is the best case scenario for Bernie Sanders, so he's going to carry the Rust Belt. The state of Minnesota is going to be a likely state, probably at most, joined by Wisconsin, now Michigan, and get this, Pennsylvania, all likely states in favor of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders has now surpassed 270 with 283 electoral votes. Now, that's not just it. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is going to probably carry a couple of these other remaining states. But as of right now, those four states look like they could go into the likely column for the best case of a Bernie Sanders election versus Donald Trump. Now, Bernie Sanders, again, like I said before, I think is one of the stronger candidates. I think that this is going to be a very interesting election, and I'm not saying that this is my prediction 100%. I'm just saying that this is a real possibility if Bernie Sanders does win the nomination, which it seems like it is a real possibility at this point. Now, the Republican Party, or Donald Trump, actually has 163 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders has 283. Keep in mind that Bernie Sanders is 120 electoral votes ahead of Donald Trump, and he could keep that up if he actually could expand on that if he wins the remaining states. But there are some states that are going to go to Donald Trump, and that one of those states is the state of Georgia. Now, that state, it's a pretty Republican state, but I do think that, in the best case for Bernie Sanders, it would still be a lean GOP state, 1 to 2%. Is still a win regardless for Donald Trump. So that's not a state that he's probably not going to lose. Another state he's probably not going to lose is the state of North Carolina. I think that one actually could go down to the wire by less than 1%, but still go to Donald Trump because it's still characterized as a swing state almost every election season, but it's still a Republican state. Florida, though, however, I do think could narrowly go to Bernie Sanders. I think that's a real possibility. But actually going up to the state of Maine, I think that's pretty interesting because I think Maine at large could go to Bernie Sanders, joined by Maine's 2nd district, which officially flips back the state of Maine. I do think that's also something to mention, considering that Maine is typically a Democratic state, but went to Trump back in 2016 in the 2nd congressional district and almost went in Maine at large, but unfortunately for Donald Trump, it did not. I think that is also really interesting, considering that nobody really expected Maine except for people who actually paid attention, and that was not many people, and Maine did not go in favor of Hillary Clinton as much as she could have had it if she had, played things differently in the past and also during the election season. Obviously, the state of New Hampshire would be into the likely column for Bernie Sanders. We already know that he's probably going to win there anyway. I mean, it's a state that really likes him a lot. If we're looking at the state of Iowa, I think that could be a narrow victory for Bernie Sanders, joined by the state of Ohio. Now, Ohio and Iowa are pretty interesting. They usually are Democratic states. I mean, with Barack Obama, and I think Nebraska 2nd would join them. But looking at those two states themselves, and 3rd district, actually, 2nd district, 3rd, I guess, entity, those all I do think could go to Bernie Sanders in his best case scenario, but just so slightly, not less than 1%, but probably 1 to 3%, depending on the state, on how it would pick the 1 to 3% in total. Now, that pretty much wraps up this video. Bernie Sanders wins with 344 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 194. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I will be coming out with a Democratic primary video soon, so stay tuned to that. Stay tuned for that. But again, thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.